Have you ever wondered what it feels like when the lines between reality and fantasy blur? Tonight, I share a deeply personal and emotionally charged story that will challenge your understanding of love, family, and identity. It's a tale of unexpected connections, hidden desires, and the complexity of human relationships. One night, everything changed. One night, a son became something more than just a son. One night, he succeeded in becoming everything his father had longed for. Are you ready for a story that will leave you breathless? Let's dive in. I'm Mark, and until recently, I thought I had everything figured out. I'm 43, a hardworking man who built a modest but happy life for myself, my partner Alex, and our 2 children, Sophie, who's off at college now, and Jake, our 19-year-old son who still lives at home while attending community college. Alex and I have been together for 18 years, and though our relationship has had its ups and downs, I always believed we were solid. Jake has always been a quiet kid, the calm to Sophie's storm, where she was all fire and energy. Jake preferred to stay in his room reading or tinkering with whatever new project had captured his interest. Over the years, I sometimes worried he might feel a little overshadowed by his sister or even by Alex and me, but whenever I asked, he'd always smile and assure me he was fine. But as he got older, I noticed little changes in him. He seemed more withdrawn, and his usual shy smiles turned into fleeting glances. There were moments when I'd catch him looking at me, his eyes holding something I couldn't quite place, something searching, almost questioning. I chalked it up to teenage awkwardness and never gave it much thought. Alex had been out of town for a few days on one of her frequent work trips. She worked for an events company and often traveled for conferences and planning sessions. It was nothing out of the ordinary, and I had grown used to holding down the fort while she was away. Sophie was busy with her studies, so it was just Jake and me in the house. The first night after Alex left, Jake seemed quieter than usual. We had dinner together, and I tried to make conversation, asking him about school and his latest project, a 3D model he'd been printing for weeks. He answered politely, but with few words, his eyes darting to mine and then away again, like he was nervous about something. "You all right, bud?" I asked, frowning. "Yeah, I'm fine, just tired," he replied with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. I didn't push it. Jake had always been more reserved, and I figured he'd open up if something was really bothering him. So I went to bed as usual, but Alex's side of the bed felt emptier than ever. And I found myself missing her presence. The warmth of her body next to mine, the soft murmur of her voice as she drifted off to sleep. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, and let the rhythmic sound of the house lull me to sleep. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the faintest creak of the bedroom door opening. I squinted into the darkness, my heart skipping a beat. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing and the faint rustle of fabric as someone moved closer. "Alex," I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. My first thought was that she had come home early, maybe surprising me. The figure didn't respond. Instead, the mattress dipped slightly as the person sat down on the edge of the bed. My groggy mind tried to piece together what was happening, but before I could fully wake up, I felt a soft hand on the top of my leg. It was such a familiar gesture, Alex's hand on my arm or leg. Her way of grounding me, her way of saying she was there. But something felt off. The hand lingered too long, the touch too tentative, as if whoever it was trying to mimic her movements, but didn't quite know how. I opened my eyes, my vision adjusting to the faint glow of the moonlight streaming through the blinds. What I saw made my heart stop. Sitting beside me wasn't Alex. It was Jake. "Jake," I said, my voice a mix of confusion and alarm. "What are you doing?" He didn't move his hand, which was still resting lightly on my arm. His face was partially shadowed, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. "Is everything okay?" I asked, sitting up now, my pulse racing. I could feel the heat of his hand through the fabric of my shirt. "Why are you?" he interrupted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to wake you." I frowned, my confusion only growing. "Then why are you?" He hesitated, his hand dropping away as he looked down at the floor. "I don't know," he said quietly. I just want to make sure you were okay. I blinked at him, unsure of what to say. The way he was looking at me, so unsure, so vulnerable, made my chest tighten. I'm fine, Jake, I said gently. But you should be in bed. It's late. For a moment, he didn't move, then slowly he stood up, his shoulders slumped. Yeah, sorry. I'll go. As he turned to leave, something in me wanted to stop him. Maybe it was the way he looked so defeated or the strange feeling of guilt twisting in my gut, but I let him go, watching as he disappeared through the door. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling as my mind raced. What had that been about? Why had he come into my room like that? And why did it leave me feeling so unsettled? The craziest part was that it didn't end there. Oh no, the story definitely didn't end there. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I had barely slept after Jake's unexpected visit, my mind unable to settle every time I closed my eyes, replaying the moment. The way he sat on the bed, the hesitation in his voice, the way his hand lingered on me, like he wasn't sure if he should be there. It was unsettling, but not in the way I expected. I shook the thoughts away as I got ready for the day. By the time I went downstairs, Jake was already at the table, sipping coffee and scrolling through his phone. He looked up when I walked in, his expression readable. But there was a tightness in his posture that hadn't been there before. Morning, I said, trying to keep my tone light. You're up early. Yeah, he said, his voice quiet. Had trouble sleeping. I hesitated for a moment before pouring myself a cup of coffee and sitting down across from him. Jake, about last night. I'm sorry, interrupted, his voice sharper than I expected. I didn't mean to freak you out or anything. I shouldn't have come into your room. It's okay, I said quickly. I was worried you seemed upset. He shrugged, his gaze dropping back to his phone. It's nothing. Forget about it. But I couldn't forget about it. The way he had looked at me, the way he had touched my arm, it was too deliberate, too meaningful to be brushed off as nothing. In some way, it had excited me. I couldn't quite place it, and the craziest part was that I felt something from his side too. I wanted to ask him more, to figure out what was going on in his head, but something in his body language warned me to leave it alone for now. And so for that moment, I did. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. Jake stayed in his room for most of it, and I busied myself with chores and errands, trying to shake the lingering unease. By the time evening rolled around, I was exhausted and ready to collapse into bed. I try not to think about the previous night as I climbed under the covers, but my mind wouldn't stop wandering. What had driven Jake to come into my room like that? Was he going through something he wasn't telling me about? Or was there something else? Something I didn't want to admit? Must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of the door creaking open again. My heart jumped, and I sat up, squinting into the darkness. Even though I knew it wasn't Alex, the figure in the doorway hesitated before stepping inside, and the moonlight revealed Jake's familiar frame. My pulse quickened, a mix of confusion and something else I couldn't name. It was as if the same situation was playing again in my mind. Perhaps Jake, I said, my voice tinged with both concern and frustration. What's going on? Why are you here again? He didn't answer right away, instead walking over to the bed and sitting down on the edge, just like the night before. He was wearing a loose t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair messy from sleep, and there was a vulnerability in his posture that tugged at something deep inside me. I'm sorry, he said softly, his gaze fixed on the floor. I know this is weird. I didn't want to be alone. What? I asked, my voice gentler now. What's going on, Jake? You can talk to me. He hesitated, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. I don't know, he admitted. It's just, Alex is gone, Sophie's not here, and the house feels so empty. I guess I just wanted, to feel close to someone. His words hit me harder than I expected. I've been so focused on my own loneliness and Alex's absence that I hadn't considered how it might be affecting Jake. He had always been quiet and reserved, but maybe that was his way of coping with the same feelings I was struggling with. It's okay, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not alone, Jake. I'm here. He looked up at me then, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, the air between us felt charged with something I couldn't explain. I gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze and smiled, trying to ease the tension. "Come on," I said, patting the bed. "If it helps, you can stay here for a bit, but you have to promise to actually sleep." I didn't know why I said that, because in some way, I felt as if I also didn't want to go to sleep again. He nodded, a small smile breaking through his nervous expression. "All right, thanks, Dad." Jake lay down on the other side of the bed, keeping a respectful distance. I turned off the light and closed my eyes, trying to ignore the strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. The room was silent except for the sound of our breathing, and I could feel his presence beside me, like a warm, steady pulse. At some point, I drifted off, but it was a restless sleep. I woke up again in the middle of the night, my senses on high alert. I wasn't sure what had woken me at first, but then I felt it, a light, hesitant touch on my arm. "Jake," I whispered, my voice groggy. He didn't answer, but his hand lingered, brushing gently against my skin. It was such a tender, deliberate gesture that my breath caught in my throat. My mind screamed at me to say something to stop this before it went any further, but my body refused to move. "Dad," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. His face was inches from mine, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and longing that I couldn't ignore. Before I could say anything, he leaned in, his lips brushing against my cheek in a gesture so fleeting and gentle that it left me stunned. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice trembling, but not in a scared way. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice breaking. I don't know." The room was thick with tension, the silence stretching between us like a taut wire. I wanted to say something to break the spell, but I was frozen, my thoughts racing too fast to make sense of it. Jake pulled back slightly, his expression a mix of shame and desperation. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I shouldn't have done that. I'll go." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness and leaving me alone with the overwhelming weight of what had just happened. I think he didn't know that I didn't mind. Actually, I quite liked it. I now felt for sure that I wanted more of it. I had never experienced this before, but for now, I decided to at least try to ignore it and invite him to sleep with me tomorrow again, and then maybe discuss it. The following day, I couldn't focus on anything. My thoughts kept circling back to Jake, his hesitant touch, his whispered apology, the way his lips had barely brushed my cheek. It was all too much, too strange, and yet it was impossible to push from my mind. Jake avoided me all morning, staying in his room with the door closed, and I didn't have the courage to knock. I told myself he probably needed space to process whatever had happened, and honestly, so did I. But as the hours dragged on, the tension in the house became unbearable. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I found myself standing outside his door, my hand hovering just inches from the wood. For a moment, I considered walking away, but then I knocked softly. "Jake," I called, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can we talk?" There was a long pause before I heard his footsteps approaching. When he opened the door, he looked different. His usual guarded expression was replaced by something softer, almost vulnerable, and it made my chest ache. "Hey," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I walked into his room, taking a moment to glance around. It was neat and orderly, just like him, but there was an air of hesitation hanging over the space. He gestured for me to sit on the bed, and I obliged, though my nerves were screaming at me to leave. "I just wanted to check in," I said after a moment. "About last night." He winced, his shoulders hunching slightly. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I know it was weird. I shouldn't have." "Jake," I interrupted, holding up a hand. "It's okay. I'm not mad. I just need to understand what's going on, and I want to tell you something." He hesitated, his hands fidgeting in his lap. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I guess I just feel really alone sometimes, and when Alex is gone, it's like, I don't know, like the house feels empty. Even with you here." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd always tried to be a good father, but hearing him say he felt alone stung. "Jake, I'm sorry if I made you feel like that," I said gently. "You're not alone. Okay, I'm here for you always." He nodded, but his gaze stayed fixed on the floor. "I know it's not the same." "What do you mean?" I asked, leaning forward slightly. He took a deep breath, his hands clenching into fists. "It's hard to explain," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's like I want to be close to you, but not in the way I'm supposed to, and I don't know what to do with that." His words hung in the air, heavy and raw, and I felt my stomach twist into knots. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to brush it off, to tell him it was just a phase, but another part, the part one didn't want to acknowledge, felt an inexplicable pull toward him. "Jake," I began carefully, "I think you're confused. It's normal to feel." "I'm not confused," he said firmly, cutting me off. His eyes met mine, then filled with a quiet intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "I know what I feel, and I know it's not normal, but I can't help it." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, we sat there in silence, the weight of his confession pressing down on us like a physical force. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory, and I was completely lost. Still, I hadn't told him how I felt, but what was yet to come would turn the story around like crazy. That night, I tried to act like everything was normal. We had dinner together, talking about mundane things like school and work, but there was an unspoken tension between us that neither of us addressed. I could feel his eyes on me whenever I looked away, and it made my skin prickle with a mix of unease and something else I couldn't name. I wanted to ask him to join me for the night, but when I tried, I just couldn't open my mouth. When I finally went to bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling as my thoughts raced. Jake's words were played in my mind, his voice filled with so much vulnerability and longing that it left me breathless. And so, I moved out of bed and went straight to Jake's room. He was still awake. "Jake," I whispered. He didn't answer at first, but I knew he had heard me. "Would you like to join me for tonight?" "Are you sure, Dad?" he said. "Yes, son. I'd love to." He didn't hesitate at all and climbed straight onto my bed. His weight caused the mattress to dip slightly. He sat there for a moment, his hands resting on his knees before he reached out and placed a hand on my arm when I entered the bed. "Dad," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Please excite me like a mom." I stared at him, my mind screaming at me to stop this, to say something, anything that would put an end to whatever was happening, but I couldn't. The look in his eyes, the raw emotion in his voice, it rendered me completely powerless. "Jake, this isn't..." I began, but he cut me off. "Don't," he whispered, his hand tightening on my arm. "Just let me stay, please." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Okay," I said finally, my voice shaky. "But we need to talk about this in the morning." He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thank you," he murmured as he laid down beside me. I felt a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Fear, guilt, and something dangerously close to anticipation. I didn't know what was happening between us, but I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. I turned around, and our eyes met immediately. There was a tension that we both couldn't resist. We both knew what was going to happen. I sat up, my mind racing. "This isn't okay," I said, though my voice wavered. "You need to go back to your room." "I don't want to." "I don't care if it's wrong," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I can't keep pretending I don't feel this way." Before I could respond, he reached out, his hand brushing against my cheek. The touch was soft, almost reverent, and it sent a shiver down my spine. "Jake, please," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This isn't." He leaned in, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was both tentative and insistent. My mind screamed at me to stop, to push him away, but my body refused to move. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The fear, the guilt, the impossibility of it all. There was only Jake, his touch, his warmth, his desperation. In that moment, I couldn't bring myself to pull away. The kiss lingered longer than it should have, longer than it had any right to. Jake's lips were soft, hesitant, but there was an urgency behind them, a desperate need to bridge the chasm that had grown between us. My mind screamed at me to stop this, to pull away and put an end to whatever had begun spiraling out of control, but my body betrayed me, frozen in the moment, unable to act. When he finally pulled back, his eyes searched mine, brimming with a mix of fear, longing, and something that looked dangerously close to hope. "Jake," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We can't. This isn't... I know it's wrong, he interrupted, his voice trembling. But I don't care. I can't keep pretending. Dad, I can't keep hiding how I feel. You don't mean that, I said, shaking my head. You're confused. This isn't real. It is real, he said firmly, his eyes locking onto mine. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. His words hit me like a tidal wave, leaving me breathless and disoriented. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was mistaken, but the conviction in his voice, the raw honesty in his gaze, made it impossible to deny that he truly believed what he was saying. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted, my voice cracking under the weight of the moment. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix anything, he said, reaching out to take my hand. His touch was warm, grounding, and it made my pulse quicken. Despite my better judgment, I let him hold my hand. Just let me in, please. I pulled my hand away, my chest tightening with a mix of fear and guilt. Jake, this isn't about what I want. It's about what's right, and this isn't right. He looked down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. I know you think that, he said quietly, but I also know you don't really believe it. Not completely. His words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't quite name. Was it guilt, shame, or the terrifying realization that a part of me didn't want to push him away? While I was silent for a moment, some excitement hit me. I looked him in the eyes, and I think he noticed it too. All of a sudden, the whole tension turned around into something way different than what our conversation was about. But from a way he moved quickly, I knew for sure that we had both felt this for the last couple of days now. The kiss had evoked something in me that I couldn't ignore. After a way too long silence, I said, "Kiss me again, Jake." What he said surprised me. "Inly, do it." Jake, as you mentioned earlier, pretend to do what Mom would do. I didn't hold back anymore. All of a sudden, something had shifted in me. I didn't hold back anything anymore. Jake leaned into me, and we kissed again, this time different, better, more intense. While kissing, he grabbed me at places Alex would too. It went from kissing to more and from bad to worse. I couldn't stop it. I didn't want to. I'm not going to go into detail, but I can tell you it was amazing, intense, sensitive, and from his side, I think a bit hurtful. I don't know why, but he had taken his role as Alex quite seriously. I could notice it from the way he mentioned my name after I'd finished. He laid there, and we both didn't know what had just happened. "Are you okay, son?" I said, "Yes, Dad. Don't worry about me. Let me go to the bathroom for a moment, and let's just go to sleep." That is the last part one can remember vividly. I think I dozed away when he was in the bathroom. The morning after, I was up early thinking about what happened last night. I was halfway through my coffee when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Jake. His presence seemed to fill the room before he even said a word. "Morning," he said softly, his voice tentative. I turned to face him, offering a small smile. "Morning. Coffee's on the counter." He nodded, walking over to pour himself a cup. For a moment, we stood in silence, the tension between us palpable. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Jake," I began, setting my mug down. "We need to talk." He stiffened, his shoulders tensing as he turned to face me. "About last night?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "About everything," I said. "I need to understand what's going on with you. What's going on with us?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. "I don't know," he admitted. I feel like I've been holding this in for so long, and I couldn't anymore. "I know it's wrong, Dad. I know that, but I can't help how I feel." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't really feel this way, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. This wasn't some fleeting thought or teenage confusion. It was something deeper, something that scared me more than I cared to admit. "Jake," I said carefully, "I need you to understand that what you're feeling, it's complicated and it's not something we can just act on." He nodded, his expression pained. "I know," he said quietly, "but it doesn't make it go away." The room fell silent again, the weight of his confession hanging between us like a thick fog. I wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay, but I didn't know how. This was uncharted territory, and I felt like I was walking a tightrope, one wrong step away from falling. The rest of the day was awkward to say the least. Jake stayed in his room for most of it, and I tried to distract myself with chores and errands, but my mind kept drifting back to him. Every time I thought about the way he looked at me, so raw, so vulnerable, I felt my chest tighten. By the time evening rolled around, as I sat in the living room nursing a glass of whiskey, Jake appeared in the doorway. He looked hesitant, his hands shoved into his pockets, but there was a determination in his eyes that made my heart race. "Can I sit?" he asked, his voice quiet. I nodded, unable to find the words to refuse him. He walked over and sat down on the couch beside me, leaving a careful amount of space between us. "I'm sorry," he said after a long silence, "for making things weird. I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how to handle it." "I know," I said, my voice soft. "It's okay. We'll figure this out." He looked at me then, his eyes filled with so much vulnerability that it made my chest ache. "Do you hate me?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Of course not," I said immediately, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I could never hate you, Jake. You're my son." He flinched slightly at the word but didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into my touch, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "I just want to be close to you," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't care how. I need you." His words broke something inside me, and I pulled him into a hug, holding him tightly as he buried his face in my shoulder. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'll always be here." For a moment, it felt like everything might be okay, that we could find a way to move past this and rebuild our relationship. But as he pulled back and looked up at me, his eyes shimmering with unshed tears, I felt that familiar tension creeping back in. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "for not giving up on me." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak as he stood to leave. I reached out and grabbed his hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Jake," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "we'll figure this out together." He smiled, a small, tentative smile that sent a pang of warmth through my chest. "We will," he said, and as he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that our story was far from over. The lines we had drawn were already beginning to blur, and though I didn't know what the future held, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. If you're feeling moved by this story, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Your support means the world to me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for more heartfelt stories that explore the complexities of love and identity. Thank you for being here.